Allers,
Present.
Deacon,
Here.
Hensley,
Present.
Lester, Mealy,
Here.
Schwartz,
Here.
Spencer,
Here.
Weiser, Wiseman, Wright.
Present.
Thank you very much. Next item is department presentations, and I believe we are kicking off with planning and protective services. Is that right? All right, sir.
All right, well, I'll go ahead and jump in and get started. So I'll be presenting the Planning and Protective Services budget presentation for today. I do have with me our division managers for each of our 5 core divisions within the department. Give kind of a brief overview of each division. I know we're several other departments going after me, so we'll try to be as efficient as we can with my presentation. Brief overviews on each department, any significant changes in that budget from last year, and then we'll finish with pink sheet requests, of which we'll have 3 of those. So, as I said, this is kind of our organizational chart for our department. We have 5 core divisions. Administration would be the 6th. Within that, we also have a couple divisions that have kind of multiple accounts associated with them. We start with planning. They have 2 accounts in case you're looking through the budget. That's 521 and 522. Neighborhood services, which has several, basically 1 for each different type of grant they've received. Environmental health, property maintenance, and building and inspection. So each of those blocks generally represents 1 employee. The 2 grade ones represent 2 planning positions that were eliminated from last year, which we'll touch on a little more at the end of this presentation, but just kind of note that in the organizational chart. So as I had said, we have 3 pink sheet requests. Those are going to affect 2 different divisions. That's the planning division and 2 in property maintenance. Property maintenance is going to address abatements and demos. Planning will be personnel. Another thing I'll touch on real briefly, this budget we're presenting is kind of presented in a way that is kind of business as usual. You heard, I think, last Thursday from the mayor that there could be a possible presentation, or there will be a presentation on a reorganization.
Purchasing this plan.
Within the organization. That would affect neighborhood services. Ms. Senzi will give a presentation on the 28th that goes a lot more in depth on what that might look like. This budget would basically present, again, like I said, as things would remain as they are today. So I'll note there are some things which I'll touch on in the planning presentation as far as staff responsibilities that deal with historic preservation. But with that, we'll jump right into each division. So this is kind of our overall department budget, very similar to the one last year. Have a couple of contractual expenses with yard waste, cemetery maintenance. We do receive some grant funding outside of really some of the one-off grants that we receive through neighborhood services. We have CDBG money, we have Campo money. These are entitlement grants that come in every year. And then we also have some general revenue that comes in through fees and permits and licensing and processing and applications. The first division is administration. That includes the director and 3 administrative staff. They generally work the front desk, so anyone coming into the development side of the city, which is downstairs, is going to be greeted by those 2 staff. They field a lot of the calls coming into the general line of the city and direct those, handle a lot of transactions, financial roles, and handing out licenses, so they stay very busy up front. Our budget for administration is approximately $413,000. No dramatic changes from budget from last year. Planning. Planning really, I like to think of as kind of the tip of the development spear. If anyone calls in, property owner, developer, asking what can I do on my property, this is the division generally that's going to answer those questions. They are really responsible for administering and maintaining our development code, which is zoning and subdivision. They have a couple commissions they staff, Board of Adjustment, Planning and Zoning. Handle a lot of different current planning requests, which are everything that's listed there. That's kind of our primary focus right now with our staffing. We do have a long-range planning component. We really kind of exist to assist the developers and residents with those development questions. So what can I do with my site? What process do I need to go through? What additional entitlements do I need to get? So those are very important questions that staff answers, and really, again, it's kind of at the forefront of kind of leading development in the community. That budget is approximately $152,000, and we do have a pink sheet item, which has caused a difference or an increase from previous year, and we'll touch on that at the end of the presentation. Campo is also kind of within our planning division. It's federally funded generally. It's to provide long-range transportation planning for our Campo area. One of the big projects we're working on right now is an active transportation plan. And I'll just go ahead and kind of give a shout out. We had a summit here on site last Friday. It was our Active Transportation Summit. Had a lot of people from different communities come in, talk about active transportation projects that are working on in their communities. Very successful. Thought it went really well. And I'll call out Katrina Williams and David Bain. Spent a lot of time putting that together. So big thank you to them. Their budget here is $190,000. Of that, the city pays about $28,000. They pay 15% of the Campo budget, basically. 530 is redevelopment and grants, also known as neighborhood services. So they administer the CDBG funds, neighborhood reinvestment funds, and then other city-sponsored funds. They have several of those budgeted grants, which Ms. Cinzia, I think, will probably go into a little more detail if there's interest in that, probably on her presentation. They also manage the solid waste contract, do a lot of work on recycling programs, and they staff the Historic Preservation Commission currently. Their budget's about $177,000. The one significant change, there's actually a decrease in their budget, and that's where we've basically been able to reappropriate some of the salary costs coming out of the general fund to some of the grant work. So we actually have a decrease there. 532 is environmental health. So this is kind of our specialized inspections that focus really on food establishments, restaurant inspections, daycare inspections. So they do a lot of that work to keep facilities operating safely. A lot of food safety training courses. If you've been through, or if you've worked in the food industry, you know you kind of have to get that food safety training to be able to do that work. They supported a lot of the efforts during the COVID, work on food recalls and boil, order responses. They do manage the yard waste compost contract, which we're in the final year of, which will be re-upped again in fiscal year 2024. So we'll see that in the future. And they also manage city cemeteries, which we have 3 of, with a budget of $551,000. That one's a little larger than the others because the payment for the yard waste is within that division. They have no pink sheet items, so no significant changes there. 533 is property maintenance. So they are the ones responsible for housing and property inspection. So if you do have an issue or a resident has an issue with a property in the city that perhaps has grass that has grown too tall, so the property maintenance is one they call, and they respond to inspect that, and if needed to facilitate the abatement of that issue. They also manage our abandoned building registry, and also maintain a landlord registration. We have over 7,000 units right now in that registration. They also do about 6,000 inspections per year, which is about on pace for what our normal year is. They've received about 2,000 reports, which a report can turn into a complaint. And with those complaints that we do receive, we have about a 98% voluntary compliance, which basically means when somebody calls and reports something, we are very good at making sure the property owners fix that issue themselves as far as the city having to get involved. We will have 2 pink sheets for that, for abatement and demolition. The budget there is $294,000. One note there is the demolition fund from last year was augmented by ARPA funds. So there was a decrease in the budget this year because that ARPA funds obviously doesn't exist this year. The last division is our building inspection division. So they administer the building code. So very important role, make sure our buildings here built in town are safe. They also take in permits and process permits, do plan review. One thing I'll note too that we've been implementing over the last year is in 2023 of November, we implemented some new software to better manage our permitting management. So that allows us to kind of digitally track our permits. It actually allows for people to submit a lot of permits online, which is, if anybody's involved or aware of that, is very much the trend going forward, is to have that kind of convenience for people to actually apply online. Right now, I could say about 17% of our permit applications are coming through the portal. And so that's something we're going to monitor going forward to really kind of push that adoption of submitting permits online. It's going to help increase our efficiency and our effectiveness, and it just, from a general perspective, is going to make things, I think, a little smoother and easier for everyone. So they're also involved in plan review, so building plans. and they also help with the administration of the SmartGov software. Our permits so far this year, about on track for about 1,600 permits, which would be a little bit of an increase, definitely a big increase from last year, a little increase from 2021. And our budget there is about $520,000. So that kind of completes our overview of the division. So I'm going to talk real quick about our 3 pink sheets. I'm going to give one shout out. So that's our online permitting software. So if you do want to submit a permit or report a code violation, this is probably the most effective way to do it. Sign in for an account. You can go on there, type in your complaint. It goes either to our property maintenance or our building division, and they can have that right there in their queue immediately as soon as you submit that. So first one we'll start with is our property maintenance pink sheet. So we have 2 requests for additional funding above what is in the current budget. And I'll say with these 2, I think from my understanding, these are kind of reoccurring requests, something we've requested in the past. So abatement, this is the money that we spend to go out and fix property maintenance issues. So somebody has to have a yard mowed, we pay someone to go out and mow that yard, and then we basically bill the owner and get paid back for that, right? So the abatement, on average, since 2015 is about $37,000 a year that we spend on abatement. If we look just over the last 3 years, we're trending down. So especially with this year, we're at about 22,000. And if that holds, I think that might bring our average down below 30,000. So we kind of see a trend there, I think, of abatement costs decreasing, which you could say relates to maybe less issues in the community. So with that, what we'd like to request is to bring the budgeted amount a little more in line with what we have historically spent. So right now we are, the budget has us at 10,000. We're going to request 25,000. We think that would generally cover about what we would expect next year without having to come back and ask for additional funding, which we have in the past done. And we can continue to do that, but this kind of, I think, kind of addresses how much we're actually spending on abatement. That's the first pink sheet. Second one is related to demolition. So demolition last year was, we spent about $153,000 so far this year on these 7 demos. So we've actually accomplished about 7 demolitions this year. We had additional ARPA funding, which increased our budget significantly over the $20,000 that has historically been what has been budgeted for demos every year. So we were able to put that money to good use, I think, this year. Projected demos on the right there, 2024. I don't want to overpromise, so I put them there, but we may be able to accomplish a couple more of those this year on our current budget. And that would be ideal. That kind of brings our existing list there down to maybe 4 or 5 next year. And so roughly, if you could see what our historical prices there on our ones from this year, I'd say an average is around 15,000, maybe 20,000 per demolition. So a cost of 100,000 would probably get us 4 to 5 approximately demos next year. And so that would be able to allow us to kind of still address some of the demos that are needed in town. I'll point out we have 29 existing dangerous buildings. Not all 29 would we anticipate having to be involved. We actually had just this last week a couple where they were on the dangerous building list, but we had some change of property ownership, and there's been some movement on demolishing it by the owner. So now those can come off. So that's what we'd like to see. So we're not necessarily being the ones that have to demo it. So I don't want to say that 29 dangerous buildings is the list we need to demo, but that is what we currently have on our demo list. All right. The last item is our staffing for our planning division. So what we have here is a graphic of the last 2 years. And I pulled this up just to kind of illustrate where we were and where we were expected to be and kind of where we're at. So the left graphic there is what was approved in the fiscal year 2022. So blue is city-funded positions, and green is MPO funded. So basically, anything you see green, we're paying 15% of that. So MPO is mostly federally funded. So we had 2 planners and 2 MPO planners last year, a year ago. In the approved fiscal year 2023, we had 2 positions that were eliminated for budgetary reasons. The expectation there was that the city would be able to manage with the remaining planning staff, which is 0.7 of the planning manager doing all the planning division's operations. The last chart, which I want to point out, is much more closer to what we have actually implemented. For a couple reasons, we were not able to only staff the planning division with 0.7 planners. One, planning got fairly busy at the first half of the year. So we had a fair amount of case requests that basically necessitated additional staffing time. So we could not let work that was coming in through the city's planning division go undone. So we did have to shift some resources, staff resources, into continuing planning efforts. The second reason is that the planning position that was eliminated and in theory moved that individual to the NPO side was not trained in NPO planning. So it is a difference between current planning and long-range transportation planning. They are different specialties. So we could not immediately move that person from that position into Campbell. Especially with the caseload we had beginning of the year, that individual kept working within the planning division. So this is much more realistic reflection probably of what happened. So we had about a half of a planner working on city work, and half working on NPO. During the first half of the year, that planning position was probably more blue than green. They were spending more time on planning operation. Over the last 4 months, we've been able to shift that better. We've had a slowdown in the planning division. That person has been able to be trained more in transportation planning. So now we think this is probably a representation about where we're at right now. So the city is now staffed with one planner for all planning operations. And that is, I will say that is very tight. So the next slide is what we're presenting for our next budget. So the only one that's going to change here is the right-hand graphic. So again, we have the last 2 fiscal years what was approved. Now we have 2024 what we're proposing. So there's 2 steps here. The pink sheet is the bottom planner that's split between NPO and planning. But one important thing we need to note here is that there was no funded planning positions. There was 2 NPO planners. This budget moves one of those NPO planners back to planning. So it's back to being funded through the general revenue. And we think that's important because we need to have at least one full planning staff member to adequately staff and provide the services that we think are expected for the division. I will note, I think that is probably the minimum that we need to continue to operate. That would be the top 3 positions on the right. The pink sheet, which is the bottom planner that we're asking for, would be split between 50-50 between city paid and NPO paid. NPO again being 50%, so 67%, 57% paid by the city. That, in my mind, would be an optimal staffing arrangement. It would allow some additional flexibility within the planning department so we don't just have one individual. We can actually maybe flex a little bit back and forth between Campo and planning, and so maybe that one planner isn't 100% planning. That way we have better flexibility in staffing time too. That would require basically the pink sheet again, because we're asking for that additional time. I'd say moving the planner from NPO back to planning though, that is in the budget currently. And that's being addressed as if that is how we need to operate with our current division right now. The one pink sheet addition is only for the additional position. I would say that also kind of addresses what I think was presented last Thursday, where there'll be additional supplemental because of the charges to the planning division without having the proper funding. We did run basically a balance on expenses there. So we ask him to cover those. And again, I'll reiterate, I think this represents an optimal staffing presentation with 3 planners plus a manager. I think we can operate with 2. I think that focuses us on current planning mostly. That third would help with a little more of the long-range planning, but we can operate a little more on the short term. And so I would almost present this as it's not necessary, but we do want to keep it at the forefront because I think that 3 is probably the minimum. So if we do see some of the growth and development that we're hoping to see in the coming years, I think that position is going to become more critical as the years go by. So I don't want it to kind of get lost in the shuffle that we did have that position at one time. So that's our presentation for our 3 pink sheets, and I'm happy to answer any questions on that.
Any questions for Mr. Smith?
I might just add one thing, Chairman, if I could. When we talk again about pink sheet items, if you're looking in your big master budget file, that is page 375, very end of the document. And a couple things to note there. You'll see there under section 2 what he mentioned in terms of, I believe that's under section 2, there it says 521, the split, planner position to be split 50-50, planning MPO. That's where that's at. And then correspondingly, we talked a little bit about their pink sheets. The final column for additional miscellaneous request, let's do that in the section 4. The 2 things there that were talked about were the additional money for abatement and demolitions. The reason that is slightly different from Exhibit E that you have is that we had a conversation with the city councilor about what could be funded through capital improvement funds. And he may want to chime in here, but we were under the guidance that really abatement is not really a legitimate capital improvement fund source to pay for that. So that's why the abatement falls off on Exhibit E. But then you'll also see that we did have 15,000 recommended in immediate loading zone for increased funding for demolitions, which we believe could be an eligible expense under that 75-25 additional unallocated capital improvement funds could be utilized for. Just want to make sure that everybody understands.
The 71,600 for the planner position, 50-50 split, is that the total personnel services cost for that position, or is that just the general fund?
Probably total, right?
I think it's the total.
I think it's total.
Okay. So, but then would the 62.5% or whatever of that number be what is charged to the general fund? So it's not, the 50-50 split is in time, but the cost is slightly.
It's a little less than 50. Right.
Okay. Thank you.
So I'll add one more thing too on our additional planner. So with the reorganization, we've talked internally with Cindy about some of the responsibilities that might shift. Historic preservation, the managing of that commission could go into planning, but I would say I don't think we have the staffing now to accommodate it. We have 3 other commissions we're manning. As I said, I think we're at the bare minimum, so I think an additional planner would probably be necessary to be able to accommodate that transition. So I just want to point that out.
On the abatement and demolition pink sheets, I mean, as you went through, so far we've been budgeting at a lower level, but that does not seem to hamper operations when there's direction given to or need to operate either in abatements or in demolitions beyond. It's just a matter of us approving a supplemental appropriation for that purpose.
Correct. That's my understanding. It's kind of historical practice is abatement would continue, and we would come back to ask for supplemental to cover those.
Any other questions on the Planning and Protective Services budget presentation? Seeing none. Well done. Thank you very much. Next, do we have the administrative department's presentations?
Yes, and I'm probably going to start that with the mayor and council presentation. So I'd like to direct you to page 24 in the mayor's approved budget. I would like to just go through and call out some things that may be for the benefit of new council members they may not be aware of. I'm going to start on the salary for elected official lines. I do want to point out that each budget that will include half of the April salaries for 5 potential new council members, since we do have the potential for that every year with electing new council members to come on. This budget also includes a part-time without benefits position, and that is actually the part-time prosecutor clerk. We include it here as opposed to in the court, since it is part of the elected official type situation with the prosecutor. As you go down to security, Security has increased because on average we spend about $200 a month. So what we had budgeted there in '23 is not sufficient to cover the cost. We have also increased dues and publications. I'd like to point out that the MML dues increased significantly in the current fiscal year, so we've accounted for that as we move into fiscal year '24. And finally, towards the bottom, purchase of equipment. There is money budgeted here which has not been budgeted in the past. The intention here is that it would fund up to the purchase of 2 iPads starting in FY '24 for those council members that are incoming if the need be. On page 25, it starts the pink sheet requests for the mayor and council. This is actually where the public relations coordinator is shown, is on the mayor's request since it was his request of us. When you look in the budget, this will actually, the cost of it will be included in the city administrator department, and I'll talk about that when we get there. The other item that's listed as a pink sheet is the additional cost for the grant reorg that Ms. Cinzy will talk about on the 28th after we finish all of the department presentations. The public relations coordinator is included in the mayor's approved budget. The grant reorg is not included there. Page 26 and 27 have the documentation for the more detailed items on the pink sheets. And Mr. Chairman, I guess the question would be here, I do have several other departments to talk about, but would you like to go in order so that the next one would be the city clerk department and she can speak on her own department? Is that the preference?
Is that right?
The city clerk budget is on page 30 of your packet, and it's pretty straightforward, totaling $138,148.71. The 2 items noticed of increase are the elections line item. This is to show more accurate representation of what election costs are per year, and that fluctuates depending on how many elections the city participates in, whether there's other taxes added or what have you. And then the other increase, or it's not really an increase, but finance had verified that maintenance agreement is for MuniCode for the city code online and updated as we pass ordinances. And the pink sheet I have included is a Sunshine record request portal software package. Not only is it good for the city clerk for tracking and automated responses to make sure our timeliness of the statute is met, but it's also benefits law, making redaction easier with drop-down justifications for the redaction. For IT with email storage, I have thousands of Sunshine request emails with attachments saved. And then also it benefits the customer a lot when we get a request for whether it's like police photos or video, they're coming in on like flash drives and CDs, which are sometimes hard to view. This would allow like a cloud portal that the user would get a sign in, and then we could upload requested documents, and then those would fall off, but be stored on the cloud so they're not easily accessed.
Chief, do I remember correctly, was that one of the items that you had included in your 2575?
It is, and we, when we had our pink sheet conversation amongst the leadership team, this was something we felt needed support because it impacts so many other departments within the city, but most importantly, as the clerk indicated, it's a customer service issue. And we felt like being timely and responsive is a pretty core component of how good a job we're doing interacting with the public. So it is an immediate item that we recommend funding as an immediate need.
Sorry about that.
That's all I have.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions for the city clerk or Councilman Spencer?
And that could be funded through the capital improvements. It's technology. We've done it in the past.
We think so because it's an investment in infrastructure, IT infrastructure.
Councilman Mealy.
On the public relations coordinator, do y'all have a draft job description yet?
We do. We've been kind of contemplating that, and I think it's something that we can bring back to council. We know there's a lot of work to be done with that position. We've looked at other examples in other places, and as you can imagine, it's a pretty wide field. But something along the lines of what other agencies in our community have is kind of what the intent that was given to us by the mayor to kind of follow, or at least as a starting point. So I would say it's in process. If that's something that this group would like us to bring back at some point, we're happy to do that.
Councilman Lesser.
I noticed that Mr. Crane has kind of served that role in some other city positions. Has there been any discussion with him about doing that role as far as Jefferson City
Are we talking about the public information or?
for the public relations? Yes.
I know that we've tried to keep him abreast of all the budget conversations that we've had and send him information, and I know he may be watching and kind of, as he has time, trying to view kind of the proceedings here. I don't know that we've had that specific a conversation with him about that. Certainly we can and be happy to.
Is he currently doing that role in Moberly? Do you know?
I can't answer that.
I know in Holt Summit.
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, they're two distinctly different positions. I mean, he's going to have his hands full, I believe, as city administrator. I think there are opportunities for us to communicate what we're doing that's going to require someone that has the time to be able to talk to the departments and be able to push the message of the city out. I mean, we had an accident on the tri-level, and the police department did a good job of talking about the accident, but there were some opportunities there to talk about tri-level reinvestment. The governor talked about it yesterday. I would envision that person being able to take that issue, package it with some of the things that we've been talking about here in the city, and then talk to the community about it. So I think they're two distinct things if we're going to do it correct. But yeah, he has a background, and maybe he can allow that person to be a little more efficient. But I still see it as two distinct. If we're going to do it right, I think it's two distinct opportunities.
Councilman Spencer.
Mayor, I'll kind of piggybacking off of Councilman Lester. You kind of see this role as a communications director. I'm still kind of confused on really which title, because I keep going back to what we had before. But you kind of envision this being more of a proactive communication instead of what we had in the past of being reactive. Like you said, with the incident we had on the tri-level, being able to immediately tie the bigger picture of infrastructure and how that could impact Jefferson City, and also just communicating what we're doing well. I think sometimes we don't have that opportunity right now. We're always in reactionary mode of having to deal with what the newspaper or the community wants and has questions on. And there's a lot of things I think our departments are doing well that they don't have time or the ability to focus on and communicate that to the public or to the news media. So is that kind of what you're envisioning this person being able to?
Yeah, hopefully they can take what's done in this building and the building next door and the building behind us. And I know police has their own communications. They talk about the issue. What hopefully this individual can do is talk about why that's important to the community and what the long-term advantages and impact of it is. Again, the discussion's out there, and I think I joked with you as you were heading to Campo yesterday. That was a good time to have a discussion about the tri-level. I mean, the governor was on there saying, maybe that made sense when it was designed, but maybe it doesn't make sense now. Can we move that 10 or 20 year time frame up? I don't know, but it doesn't hurt to talk about it and talk about the impact to the community. So I just see that person, they're going to have some flexibility to be able to react very quickly on an issue like that. But then, yeah, go to departments. We do a lot of great things in this building. We get arrows on things we don't do right. That's fair. I mean, the public ought to talk to us, but they ought to also know the good things that this council is doing on behalf of the city You know, we had a meeting on housing yesterday. We ought to be continuing to talk about some of the positive moves. I mean, we've had discussions on parking, we've had discussions on transit. We need to get that out to the community so they understand it. And so, yeah, I see it as a proactive, what this council is doing to address issues that we hear from the public. And if we're not doing a good job, then that person needs to be, help us get the message out of, we get it, we need to do a better job and, you know, continue to keep that message out.
Thank you.
Councilman Allers.
One question for the mayor. Do you, Mayor Fitzwater, do you also read something along with the idea of how well or what we're doing at the city may work with partners over at the Capitol and have a constant line of communications open so that if there are things going over there that, hey, I can tap into this, they can pass it on to you. I mean, do you see how big of a role do you see that this person plays with all information, whether are, you know, partners at the Capitol or, you know, and all that, or is it more or less city all related to the citizens? I mean, what is your vision for this?
My vision would be that it would be city hall related. I think, you know, Councilman Lester's question, I see that as a role for the city administrator to be talking about what's going on in the city, and certainly the mayor. I mean, we have council members that spend time in the Capitol. That I do see as a role for the city administrator. Not over there getting in Ms. Doctorian's way and lobbying, but just getting the message out. We're here, we're interested in what's going on. Here's what the city's up to, here's how you could be a partner. But I don't see that communications director. You know, there may be some overlap, but I do see that as a role for the city administrator. And, you know, I always point to Dr. Mosley at Lincoln. I mean, he's visible in the Capitol, but he's not there all the time. He doesn't get in the way of their lobbyists, but he's just saying, you know, Lincoln's in town, we've got needs, here's what we can do, and then he's gone. And then the lobbyists do their thing.
Oh, no, I didn't mean for to do with the Miss Doctoria and all that. I meant as far as.
No, but I'm saying that I see as a role for the administrator, but I don't see our communications person, at least in my vision. I mean, that it's going to be someone that reports to the city administrator. So, I mean, he will have a lot of impact on that, but I would guess he would see it the same way. But as Chief indicated, we have not had a set down eyeball to eyeball discussion, but he is aware it's part of the budget process.
Moment.
Not to step on the mayor's message, but I think a professional communicator could help the city administrator help craft messages and this, you know, figure out, okay, here's what we need to say when the city administrator is over at the Capitol. So I think it would be an asset, but not the lead.
I wasn't. That's not what I was referring to. I thought maybe working hand in hand here and then notifying the people over there too, that, you know, so that everybody's kind of on the same page, know what's going on, and is a conduit for information to everyone about Jeff City. That's I guess I didn't phrase it right. But as a conduit of information so everyone kind of knows what's all going on.
And, you know, I think Ms. Burns over at the school, I think is another example. I mean, she doesn't get in Mr. McGraw's way as superintendent, but as Mr. Molman indicated, helping craft that message, making sure the community knows. And, you know, I think we have a responsibility to do that. So, yeah, I think in partner they can move us forward and help this council get your message out.
Well, just want to remind the room, we have about 20 minutes left in our scheduled time and miles to go before we adjourn. So, but again, if there are questions or anything, feel free to interrupt anytime. But Ms. Perry?
Next department is City Administrator, Department 140 on page 38 of your packet. The only thing I'd really like to call out here is that there has been a significant change in the salaries from 23 to 24. A couple of reasons for that. We do have in this department 3 staff people. This is the city administrator, this is an administrative person, and this is also where the budget for the public relations coordinator is now shown per the mayor's request. So that is the significant change in this department, is that it includes multiple staff members that have not been there in the past. Next would be the city attorney.
Thank you. Not a whole lot of highlights in the budget this year, so no pink sheets from the city attorney's office this year. Our budget constitutes less than 1% of the general fund expenditures and less than 0.5% of total fund expenditures. One change in the budget from this year, we have a new associate city attorney. We were blessed to be able to find a highly experienced attorney, so personnel services have gone up just based on the pure amount of experience that our new associate city attorney brings. In conjunction with that is some increases in the training, specifically to help out bringing the new associate city attorney up to speed with municipal practice. So former prosecutor and state attorney, but so bringing up to speed on municipal practice would be helpful. That's really it on any changes to the city attorney's budget.
Any questions for Mr. Molman? Thank you very much.
Next would be municipal court, and it starts on page 43. And Ms. Sullivan's going to cover municipal court.
New face to you guys. My name is Lindsay Sullivan. I'm the court administrator. I work directly under the municipal judge now. We've parted ways with the law department to keep in compliance with the Supreme Court rules. Very short and sweet. We are asking only for a $1,500 increase with security, and that is due to change in security firms from last year. They billed just slightly higher than our previous firm. No pink sheets.
Sorry, and that's been built into the mayor's proposed budget, correct?
Yes,
Looks like.
and it is reflected on page 45.
Thank you very much.
Well,
Any questions?
Next would be the Human Resources Department. That one starts on page 46. And Ms. Strope is going to take care of that.
Thank you. Okay, so our budget, total budget's $413,000. That includes 3.5 FTEs. So on that, 82% of that is personnel services, 16% of that is citywide expenses, and then 2% of that is human resources specific departmental expenses. We don't have a lot of changes in our budget this year. We had 3 line items that were lower. That's printing, operational supplies, and professional services. The only real increase in non-personnel line items was in our maintenance agreements, and that wasn't any change in those. That was just kind of your standard increases in those agreements each year. To share some statistics, we sent out 52 weekly newsletters to the employees communicating various issues such as job opportunities, wellness initiatives, training opportunities, benefit information. We had 169 wellness outreach efforts. We had coordinated various citywide events. I didn't actually count them up, but it's things like Public Service Recognition Week, our annual awards luncheon, employee family skate night, things like that. We had 37 workers' compensation claims that we processed. As far as turnover, citywide turnover was about 13%. That is high for the city. 23% of our turnover was due to retirements. Sadly, 3% was also due to deaths from employees. So it was a rough year. Another statistic that I wanted to share is our number of recruitments. In fiscal year 22, we did 256 individual recruitments and received 1,276 applications in that process. You hear talk across the country about the difficulty in getting employees and how everyone is searching and unable to find employees. And you hear that from staff. You've heard it from some of our department directors, from our city administrator. So I thought, let me go back and look at our statistics from fiscal year 15 and compare it. So I looked at the statistics we had in our budget. Then we did 89 recruitments that year. That's an increase of 287% increase in number of recruitments. We have not increased that many positions in the city. Number of applications, we received 4,211 applications that year. That's a decrease that we've seen of 330%. So in fiscal year 15, we received about 47 applications, which is separate individual applicants for each position. Last year, we received on average 5. So, and we was not unusual, unfortunately, that we would not receive any for a position. So I thought that would be interesting for you guys to see. Pink sheet items, walk through those real quick. We had 6 pink sheet items. First one is the employment marketing awareness campaign. In this very difficult time of hiring that we just talked about, this would allow us to do some continual marketing to brand the city as a great place to work. So when people are looking to switch jobs, they may think, hey, I want to go see what the city has to offer. It would also allow us to highlight specific positions or work areas where we do a lot of recruiting, such as the police department, transit, our various maintenance positions, et cetera. Our citywide internship program. This is a program that the city has very successfully offered over the years to market ourselves to prospective employees, to complete special projects and programs, to assess future employees, and contribute to the overall good of the city by supporting and attracting young adults to our community. Our human resources assistant position. This is a not new request for our department. By benchmarking standards, we should have 5 full-time employees in our human resources department to be able to operate at a fully functioning level compared to the 3.5 that we have currently working. Another position would allow us to expand our recruiting and retention efforts and to work in a more progressive manner. The city match of $25 for deferred compensation for our participating employees. Again, this is also not a new ask. This benefit enhancement would allow for easy budgeting, and it would help with both recruiting and retention efforts. And I'll just mention too that this is a benefit that the state of Missouri reinstituted last July for their employees. The health insurance fund appropriation is another ongoing request due to the high cost of a few high claimants, which has depleted our fund balance and required supplemental appropriations the last few years. And then the final request is a lump sum payment to loggers for our police and fire department pensions. This is another ongoing request that in time will lower the cost to the city. It would not be an immediate savings to the city, but a long-term investment in the city. And we also have 2 pink sheet items in the non-departmental budget that I'd be remiss if I didn't mention. The first is the increased sick leave accrual and increased vacation accrual and cap that we talked about quite a bit on Monday. So I'm not going to rehash that one. I would just like to mention our support for this enhancement. The second goes along with the first request, but due to the tight budget, it was not included in the city administrator's budget this year. This is an increase to the sick leave payout from 20% to 50% for employees who are leaving employment in good standing with over 20 years of service to the city. That's typically our retirees. This was approved in the firefighters contract, so it would bring this benefit to all of the rest of the employees. This is not currently a line item in the budget. I mean, just the aspect of paying out sick leave upon an employee leaving is not currently a line item in the budget, and we feel it could continue to be managed in the same manner. Could it become difficult on occasion? Yes. And although we can't calculate future costs, those really aren't known. I did do an analysis that had we had this in effect for the past 5 years, what it would have cost. Those amounts are on the board. They're also on the pink sheet item. So this benefit enhancement also goes along with the questions that were asked at Monday's meeting regarding the sick leave benefit the state of Missouri provides, where they do not have a cap on their sick leave. We do have a cap, and we're not asking to change that cap. And they can also convert their sick leave balances to service credit upon retirement. So with that, I will close, and I would like to say thank you for supporting our employees and assisting us in making this a great place to work.
Any questions? Councilman Allers.
I don't know if this is where we need to get into discussion, but on the health insurance thing, you said $1 million that could come up. Is that something if that is I don't know if this is even appropriate setting for it, but just looking at it, is that a bigger discussion we need to have when do we bid that portion of the budget out, since we're getting close to the end of the budget year? Well, RFPs, am I using the right things for that, for the city? Will that come out like, let's say, Wall Street and whoever else handles insurance like that? Will that help with the cost of all this to bring it down and all that? Because there was mention last meeting about something after the budget, there was $1 million something that came out about that. Is that something we talk about here, or is that further discussion somewhere down the line that we can talk about the cost of the insurance and all that?
I think it's germane to HR, right?
It is. It is something though that we've talked about, the Chief Schofield and Finance Department, that we probably need a bigger discussion on it than just here. But to answer your question about when does that come out, we have been working on that for a while now, working very closely with Wall Street. We're reviewing a lot of different options. I mean, we do this every year, but we're doing it even much more extensively this year and looking at our options. But quite honestly, we only have until about the end of next month to make a decision. And that would be a decision and approval through the council, just because of the timelines of open enrollment and that type of thing. So our plan is to have recommendations to the council next month. And that's the timeline we're working with. And
as we wind and get the budget set for next year, that's the timeline. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Spencer.
Yeah, I guess, being that we only have 10 minutes left, I've got some thorough.
We got 10 minutes.
My point is probably gonna take longer than 10
Well,
minutes.
we're not gonna get through everything that was scheduled for today, so the other departments will probably be pushed to next time.
And I might ask for a little liberty of coming back for some clarifications, but to tie on into what Councilman Aller said, what is the term of our broker contract?
it will expire in, I think it's April of next year, so April of 24. So we'll be doing an RFP process after the first of the year.
Okay. What, I was just trying to remember, I thought when we did that contract extension, that was only for, that had been opened up for years.
Yeah, we were able to do one more year. So we were able, I think we're at like the 5th and final now. And that's why we will have to do an RFP next year.
So was.
What contract is that?
Insurance brokerage? Is that what?
Insurance brokerage, yeah. Brokerage contract. I thought that was good for a year, but did you grant them another year extension or?
Another year was granted to them, yes.
But that wasn't voted on us.
I have to go back and see if that came to the council. It would have come as either a resolution or a consent agenda item.
It's just prior to the one-year extension with Wall Street, there had been an RFP process where I believe another broker was identified and recommended. And then for a number of reasons that we're definitely not gonna have to cover here today, the decision or the instruction of the council was to just extend one more year with Wall Street, if I'm remembering all this correctly. And so even though it was only after, I guess, what would have been the 3rd year of that contract, at that point, staff was recommending a different broker. And then that extra year went by, and I mean, I certainly don't remember another year of extension being approved in the meantime. beyond that 1 year, which I can't believe was over a year ago already. And yeah, that's how I remembered. And if it slid through on a consent item, then I'd be surprised if it had been put there, given how much conversation there was.
And frustration from even staff that.
Yeah, that'd be good to know though.
I would like to know that.
No, that was my.
All right, thanks.
To continue on. So what year was the switch made to go from fully insured to self-insured?
2016.
And in July of 2015, you guys had an employee group to kind of navigate some of these questions from going from fully insured to self-insured. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. What was the genesis of switching from fully insured to self-insured?
It was a look at, in-depth look at our health insurance plans and what is the best option for us at that time.
So there was, I'm assuming you're alluding to that there was a cost savings component to it.
There's not necessarily always a cost savings component to it, but it's being able to keep the money that's not expended and be able to build a reserve, which then typically, if you can build a large reserve, then that can help you with the fluctuations. So when you have a bad year, usually it can cover the bad years. When you have a good year, that's saved up for those bad years.
Where did those initial immediate savings go?
They went into fund balance.
But also didn't go to hire an HR, a staff person in your department too?
I have to look at that.
So I guess my frustration is, I'll try to say this as sensitive as I can and tactfully as I can. You have been the architect, the engineer of making two of the biggest financial mistakes that we've ever had as a city. From going from Missouri Consolidated to the open market for fully insured, and then go from fully insured to self-insured. And I think that has really financially sunk us to a point of frustration from my point. Can you give us, can you explain a little bit of that, of why we went down this road?
I think honestly, at the times, those were by far the best options to do. And I will stand behind those 100%.
Thank you.
Even though
There
we've had
times,
people that sat in that committee that pretty much told you what was going to happen, and it's come to fruition today.
Well, one, I would never have overruled the committee. So it was committee decision and recommendation, as well as a recommendation from Wall Street. It was not solely my decision in any way, shape, or form. Did I spearhead those committees? Absolutely. And did I bring the information forward to the council? Absolutely. But it was not my sole decision. Did I agree with the decision at the time? Yes, I did. But I think that was the best decision at the time. It was the recommendation from our broker. I think the city did the right thing. I think the council did the right thing by approving those. We didn't unfortunately have a crystal ball to know what was going to happen in the future.
But isn't that the advantage of going from, isn't that a little bit of the security of having a fully insured plan, is that anticipated increases are more manageable than absorbing all the risk from a self-insured model?
Not necessarily, because a fully insured plan, an insurance company, if they fully insure it and they have high cost claims, they are going to make those up in future years. So the rates we have now, we probably would not have right now if we had stayed in the fully insured market.
And with our catastrophic case that we have, there's nothing that we're doing now that prevents us from having another one. There is probably, in all likelihood, no ability for us to go back to a fully insured plan unless an Anthem, United Healthcare, a big provider would be willing to absorb the loss just to increase numbers. You would agree with that?
Pretty much, we are extensively looking and trying to get numbers from Anthem on that to verify it.
And have you looked at getting back into Missouri Consolidated as well?
We have, we're looking and talking with them now. And we're looking at some other options too.
Okay, we've hit 1 o'clock. I'm very sorry to interrupt. But if
I'll just have the liberty.
we can, I think we can pick up right where we're leaving off right now at our next meeting. Is that all right?
Great,
Thank you very much for your flexibility.
So Chairman, we'll start the next meeting then with the presentations that weren't complete today and then move on to the next schedule, which would be fire and police.
I think if we pick up right where we're leaving off right now with the HR discussion, and then it'll be what, like finance, IT, non-departmental.
Correct, but then we also would have the sales tax fund and then the small special revenue funds, JC Submarine, Veterans Plaza, those kinds of things. I think we can cover those pretty quickly then.
Is there anyone here today to make public comment? Thank you. Any 10-second final remarks from the committee members in terms of discussion? Seeing none. Thank you. We are adjourned until August 24th at noon.